South America's very own Chile has a knack for being unique in its geography. Grab an atlas and you'd know why. You'd see that the country exists as a narrow corridor. This is to say that in terms of land area, it has a clinching width, while its length runs from north to south conjecture. And that particular geographical positioning had given Chile an interesting population distribution. The vast majority of Chile's people stay close to its capital. And here's why. Before we start, subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon to never miss a video from us. The centralized population. Geography is peculiarly interesting. As we know our world today, there are 3 countries in the world that are extremely long and narrow in their geographical positioning. And if you were paying attention in the geography class, you'd know those unique countries are Chile, Vietnam, and Norway. The limited width of these countries would mean the population is highly decentralized. This is to say that at least optically, the distribution of the population is somewhat uniform, or evenly distributed to some degree. Even intuitively, that would make sense, right? The elongated geography of these countries means that the population exists as a trail and not a central point. Well, that only remains true for Vietnam and Norway, while Chile exists as an anomaly. You see, if you pick up the population distribution map of, let's say, Vietnam, you'd see small dots all over the place. The widespread distribution of those specks mean that Vietnam is highly decentralized. Whereas if you look for the same measures for Chile, you'd be shocked to know that most of its population is centralized in one geographical area. That's right, almost 1/3 of Chile's population lives around the greater Santiago region for numerous reasons. But before unpacking those, let's get the numbers right, shall we? In 2021, the population of Chile was more than 19 million. The latest census shows more than 6 million people happen to live in Greater Santiago. Yep, the disproportionate distribution of the population is drastic here. After the Chilean capital, the most densely populated areas are Greater Concepcion, along the coast of Santiago's south, and Greater Valparaiso, along the coast to Santiago's west. So the way it stands today, the central region, or the middle third of the country, houses 90% of the Chilean population. This particular statistic makes Chile one of the most centralized countries in the world, despite its long and narrow geographical existence. And to understand why this is the case, we'd deep dive into the history of Chile's origins. Yep, the centralized population of the country is intricately tied to its territorial history. Both fascinating and weird. Chile's origins. Before the inception of modern-day Chile, the country was mostly inhabited by indigenous tribes and civilizations. When these aboriginals made their way to the uncharted land, the global interest in the country was quite limited. That, of course, changed readily when Spanish conquistadors made it to Chile. Yet in pre-colonial times, there were 2 indigenous tribes that had densely populated the land. The present-day northern Chile was occupied by the Incan Empire, who had controlled the terrain for a century before their encounter with the colonizers. The Incan people were always at odds with the Mapuche tribe that had occupied the southern part of Chile. Years later, and after some serious struggle, the indigenous tribes lost the Great War against Spanish colonizers who would establish an empire of their own. In this pursuit, Chile became Spain's colony and was largely controlled by the majority of Peruvian influence. In the years to come, French ruler Napoleon Bonaparte would invade Spain in 1807. This is when the aristocratic Chileans started to question their Spanish masters. While in principle they were still a Spanish colony, Napoleon's brother, Joseph, was ruling the empire. Local Chilean leaders saw a massive opportunity in regaining control of their territory until the rightful divine monarch was decided for their country. On September 18, 1810, the Criollo leaders of Santiago did the unexpected. They declared their independence from Spain to control their territory. Even though the local leaders were controlling a small territory of the country, their rule would later expand. In 1826, Chilean natives took control of Chloe, and in 1843, they acquired the Magallanes region in the south. One massive impasse in the expansion of Chile was the deadly, long-drawn war between Argentina and the indigenous tribes, known as the Conquest of the Desert. By the mid-1800s, modern-day Chile was effectively split into 2 parts. While Santiago and the Chilean southern tip were controlled by the natives, the central part of the country was under Argentinian control. The conflict continued till 1881, before Chile and Argentina signed the Boundary Treaty, or Tratado de Límites of 1881. The agreement was a landmark. After all, Chile had regained the middle chunk of its territory. Later on, Chile would begin its brand new territorial feud with the newly independent Bolivia, which had tried to regain the country's northern part. Which was fairly odd because the Atacama Desert wasn't exactly a very attractive option for both of the young countries. While the dispute existed in principle, Chile and Bolivia weren't exactly fighting a war, until the discovery of natural minerals in the desert triggered the War of the Pacific. Eventually, Chile won the decisive war and effectively took control of its northern region too. In 1890, modern Chile was born. The extreme north and south. So, there you go. The historical precedence here is striking. For decades, the population of the country was centralized around its capital because of necessity. The territorial disputes had limited the Chilean population to Santiago. But of course, there are some other reasons too. You see, the north-south longevity of Chile gives the country its unique variation in climate. Starting from the infamous Atacama Desert in the north, the country is extremely dry and inhabitable. Practically, there's no rainfall in that particular region. In the extreme south, the climate is pretty harsh and cold. Now, what is really interesting is that other than being the polar ends of climate variability, these two regions are Chile's very own natural resource frontiers. The deserted area is single-handedly responsible for Chile's mineral boom of the 20th century. Rich in minerals like nitrates, borax, and copper, this particular region is the backbone of locally grown industries in Chile. The south is equally important, if not more. That particular region happens to be rich in oil and natural gas. You see, these two extremes are naturally suited for more sparse populations and industrial towns. Not to mention, Santiago just looks lucrative in comparison. The Chilean capital has that favorable Mediterranean climate that gives you long, warm summers and partly cloudy winters. And honestly, who wouldn't love that? There is a reason why people want to vacation in the south of France, Italy, Greece, Portugal, Turkey, and even southern Spain. These regions boast a perfect Mediterranean climate with a dash of hilly landscape, just like Santiago. So, of course, every Chilean strives to live through the more bearable weather, the mountainous border. But keeping climate aside, the biggest issue with Chile is its inaccessible land. So, as the modern order of the world goes, more and more countries are optimizing their land to cater to growing populations and industrialization. One of the biggest dilemmas surrounding climate change is the removal of natural landscapes to create urban centers. For better or worse, Chile can't do that. This is because the country exists under the umbrella of the mighty Andes that has rendered most of Chile mountainous. To put it in numbers, 80% of the country is just rocky, mountainous terrain. And such conditions mean that the land area for Chile's growing population is actually quite restricted. The population density in such regions is extremely low. Not to mention, the government hasn't taken a key interest in exploring the habitability of such harsh terrains. So, in the case of unprecedented growth in population, it's uncertain how Chile deals with new plans for urbanization. As we see it today, the Andes provide a natural border to the country as well. Its mighty spread of the mountainous range and its neighboring infinite ocean have rendered Chile a narrow corridor. The Santiago Dream. Naturally, Santiago seems like the best option for residents because the city has now established itself as the hub of social mobility and dreams. After the unprecedented growth in the Chilean economy in the 1990s, the capital city emerged as a bustling land of economic opportunities. Even with the recent trend of inward migration in Santiago, it's obvious that people are opting for the city for more lucrative employment options. The charm of living in the capital city is also facilitated by the state support. You see, the geographical positioning of the country means that it's vulnerable to water-related natural disasters. Owing to the external pressure of the Nazca Plate, the South American coast is generally quite vulnerable to immense destruction. Chile's turbulent history with tsunamis can testify to that. Since Santiago is away from the coastline, its economic capacities are hardly ever compromised. For any given day in the capital city, it's business as usual. People gravitate towards the center because, well, it's the government's favorite spot to invest their resources. You see, Chile offers its gratitude to the financial center of the country by establishing top-notch infrastructure here. With that comes the promise of more jobs. And that's how the capital becomes more desirable day by day. Enjoyed this video? Give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to our channel for more informative content, and share this video with your friends.